Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome once again to Real Talk with me, your host for today, Yusuf Akudi. We're live once again from our Bradford studio, and as always we talk about things that are very topical and something that is dear to all of our hearts, whether it's education, health and financial matters, religious matters or anything else. And as always, I will always have somebody as a practitioner, professional or well-versed with the matter. Today we're talking about something a bit more extreme, I suppose, and something that is a taboo subject in most of our communities. And hence I have invited Sister Halima Begum and Sister Safia Hussain, who are both practitioners in their right in the issue of domestic violence. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sister Safia, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for coming on to IQRA TV.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay. And Sister Halima, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
MashaAllah. Thank you for coming on IQRA TV.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Jazakallah. I'll introduce both of you, although various different backgrounds. Sister Safia, you first. I know you're a fitness instructor and a karate train and teach karate.
That's right, yes.
And you're a black belt, so I'm
I am.
well aware. And you fought just recently and a few tournaments. But more importantly, you've worked with many homeless, troubled families, issues in relation to domestic violence and etc.
That's right, yes. I've worked quite a few years of my life with a lot of vulnerable people. Worked with a lot of women and children fleeing domestic abuse. I've worked with the troubled families, as well as working with young homeless people. Majority of my life, just recently I've obviously moved away from it, working in a similar but kind of different kind of way of doing things, I think. But yes, domestic violence is a huge issue, especially within our community as well.
Okay. And Sister Halima Begum, your background is quite diverse, with being practicing psychotherapist, helping vulnerable teenagers, adults, children, and also a public speaker, work with various different charities, as well as your training and helping parents in terms of other issues. So
Parenting,
parenting,
yeah, especially for parents struggling with teenagers.
Right, okay.
So, yeah.
And both of you, I mean, you've had, I suppose I'll come to you first, Halima. You've had counselling, you've had training, you've helped people. Is there anything, first of all, what is domestic violence? Define to me, I mean, what would you class as, is there any indicators, is there anything that you would say, or any one of you wanting to come into this in terms of...
I think the most important thing about domestic violence and abuse is, obviously it's such a broad topic, and it's very, it's kind of, I think normally when you think of abuse, we think of seeing a woman with, with a black eye or something, and we always assume it'll be her husband, who having abused her. What we forget is, abuse, it's nothing to do with gender. So for example, women abuse their husbands. It can be emotional abuse, financial abuse, spiritual, and of course we have the most common that we tend to notice a lot often is the physical abuse. And once again, the signs, if it's physical abuse, they can be quite apparent. But even then, a lot of women learn how to put makeup on and to cover that up. And with things like financial, spiritual or emotional abuse, it's a lot harder to detect that.
Yeah, I mean that's something obviously when I was working with a lot of women, the physical, you see the visuals, you see people with bruises, you see things like that. But when it comes to the other things, I mean, control is a huge issue. Who you can see, what you can wear, what you can do, when you can leave the house and things like that. Now that's something that also comes under domestic violence. Not giving them the money, having like a budget that you can, or going shopping with them, is all part and parcel of domestic violence. And like Sister Halima said, it's not just about the physical aspects. It's not just about a man abusing his wife. Abuse can be from any family member. It could be from the parents, could be from the in-laws, could be from brothers, could be sisters. You know, that's all comes under domestic violence, and it's really important to understand all the different aspects of domestic violence, not just the physical.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
I mean, you say you've worked with troubled families, and let me ask you maybe a personal question to both of you. Sophia, maybe you first.
Sure.
Is there anything that keeps coming to your mind, or is there any particular story that you've dealt with and you've had a difficult time, or you found it shocking, or you've thought, okay, here we are, we could have done something to stop this?
I mean, I've worked with, like I said, so many different people, and you know, there's so many different scenarios. One of the things I've realised is what surprises me is how people are not aware of what's available for them, the services that are out there, and there's so much support that is out there for people, but understanding that, and I think sometimes the difficulty is especially for women, is not being able to open up due to the stigma that's related to opening up, saying things about a particular family member. I think that's the most difficult part of it. And I think one thing I've realised is that our culture, our traditions tend to play a big part in how families deal with situations. And I think that's what a lot of people tend to find really difficult. And that is something that I have come across, especially with a lot of the ethnic minority communities that I have dealt with. That is a major concern, as to, you know, if I say something, then it's going to be, you know, a shame upon my family or myself. I'll be too embarrassed. And these are the things that you tend to hear a great deal. Rather than looking for a solution, they tend to brush everything under the carpet. Which is you know, is again very concerning, because all that's doing is you allowing it to continue. And I think that's
it's easy to.
I mean, before I ask you to touch on this culture, religion, brush on the side, I'm going to come back to Halima with the same question I posed to you. Is there anything that sticks to your mind? Is there any particular story? Or is there anything that you might have experienced that, wow, this is shocking, this is so unreal?
Okay, I had a sister once ring me, and she said I had an event taking place, and she rang me later on. She said, "Sis, I'm sorry, I couldn't make it to your event." And I said, you know, it's fine, because she's got quite a few kids, and I've known her for a while. And I think this is another thing, is sometimes we think, nah, I don't know anyone. And according to statistics, actually 1 in 3 women are likely to experience abuse. So that means you will know someone who's being abused. But anyway, so she rings me and she says, you know, I'm sorry. And I said, it's fine. And then I was quite shocked with what she told me. So at that point, she was, I think, 4 or 5 months expecting with a 4th child. And she said, she goes, you won't believe this, because you know my husband, and you know, and his, you know, you have a lot of respect for him. So you won't believe what I say this, but you know, he's always had anger issues. And she told me of an incident. She goes, lately it's been even worse. So, you know, he came up to me and he kind of like, he punched her. And then as she was on the floor, he was kind of almost kind of like attempting to strangle her, and he threatened her, and he said, he kind of said these horrible things to her, and he said that, you know, if you ever do anything like this again, I can't remember what it was, but, you know, I will kill you and I'll kill the baby. And that is his baby. And that was one thing I was absolutely shocked. Like, I remember I didn't speak for a while. I didn't know what to say. I was like, and unfortunately her daughter witnessed that, and I think she tried to ring someone. She picked up the phone. She was going to ring her auntie, and he snatched the phone off her, and I think he smacked her. And it makes me wonder, number one, that's your wife. Abuse is not okay under any circumstances. That's your wife. She's pregnant. She's vulnerable, and the daughter saw that. I mean, what kind of image is she going to now have of men? It's not funny, but shockingly enough, afterwards what happened, it was kind of ironic. The father spoke to me, and he doesn't know I know, and he said, you know, my son's quite troubling lately, you know, I'm not happy with him because he's starting hitting his sister. And I say to him, it's not okay for you to hit your sister. And I really, really bit my tongue, because I thought, I don't want him to know his wife's told me, because I don't know what's going to happen. But, you know, I felt like saying, well, where do you think your child is learning this behaviour? Someone has to break that cycle. So that still stayed with me. And I think it's easy for us to think, oh, leave your husband. And I used to think well, just women should be independent, and you know, you should be able to earn your own when you work yourself. And you know, I come across like a feminist, although I'm not, because as Muslims we don't need feminism. But I used to think it's that simple: pack your bags, walk out. But it's not. You know, you're traumatized. A lot of women think it's their fault. And once I spoke to another woman, and she said, I want to leave my husband, but it's my second marriage. And she goes, if I leave him now, who's going to marry me for a third time? And she goes, I'll put weight on too. So, you know, there's a lot of things, a lot of times there's mind games there. The person abused thinks it's their fault. You know, they don't have the money, like you mentioned. If someone's controlling their money, it's a matter of survival. And so there's a lot there.
You see, this story that you just told me, which is real for you in terms of the individuals you've dealt with. But for me, I mean, if you want to have a drink of water, please feel, I mean, just listening to that, it's beggars belief in terms of, first and foremost, there's 3 victims there. The unborn child, the mother, and also the daughter. We're forgetting the young daughter. God knows you've dealt with the family, and maybe you've even provided therapy or the things that you do in terms of counselling. But there's a young daughter who's going to grow up with a particular mindset and a particular norm in her household that's going to be there. And this is something that is alarming. You mentioned a statistic that 1 in 3 women have been through some kind of DV, domestic violence, in some way, shape or form throughout their lives, which is alarming. I didn't even know that, to be honest, but 1 in 3 is a huge figure. I don't know who wants to take the next question, but Safiya or Halima, both of you maybe, and you can take turns and answer this because of your nature of your jobs. But the next question I'm going to ask you both is how does them figures and these stories resonate in terms of the Asian cultural Muslim community that we have in our areas? And I don't know if you've worked in these areas or have experience in these areas. And we talked about something earlier on, which we'll maybe discuss a bit later on, in terms of culture versus religion and coming into the domestic violence side, and how you were saying that we sometimes sweep it under the carpet. But the initial point is the statistics and Asian communities and or Muslim communities. Muslim community is not one synonymous, because you've got so many different castes and creeds. But I'm talking about specifically here the Asian subcontinent Muslim communities around UK.
I mean, like I said, one of the things that we do tend to see is our community coming out with these things. You know, mentioning it, talking about it to other people. It is very difficult. I mean, as you said, Halima, it's one of those things where there's always that reluctance. You need to have a little bit of confidence with somebody, and you know, like you mentioned, the person that you knew, for her to come out and say what she did is a big thing. And I think usually the concern is, you know, the partner who in question, as in the perpetrator, which is which is the term used for the abuser. You know, they are very respectable people within the community as well. And you see this, and this is something that tends to hold back a lot of people. You know, should we say something? But what I'm going to do is kind of go back from that, because usually when the tables are turned and it's the male as the victim and the woman as a perpetrator, again, for men to come out and talk about this, you know, for a man to come out and say, my wife is abusing me. She's, you know, she's controlling everything I do, financially, emotionally, physically, is a big thing. And again, that is a major issue and concern within our communities, I think. And I think there should be more things done out there. You know, it's okay if something is happening. I think, you know, I just want to kind of say to people, it's okay to talk about it to somebody. Always find that trusting person, like somebody, you know, somebody came to you. It's always okay to mention it to somebody. You know, somebody will give you that helping hand. There is nothing embarrassing with telling somebody this is how you're being treated, regardless of what gender you are.
I think it's that fear, isn't it? It's, if I put this out there, will I be believed in?
Yes.
You know, I think a lot of times people want support too, but it's also, will I be believed in? And you see this in victims of sexual abuse, you know,
That's right,
I tend to work with. A lot of times it's, you'd be so shocking. A lot of times they've opened up. It takes so much courage. They've opened up, told their mother or their sister or someone, and that person's not believed in them. And when they come into therapy, you know, they like, sometimes they say they want to open up and then they're not, because there's that battle with, what if the person doesn't believe me? And it's the same with domestic violence. Like you said, if the perpetrator is someone who's well known in the community, like once again, I was speaking to a woman on the way here, and I said, you know, are there any things you want to share? And she said how we imagine that people who are being abused and abusing, it's in a kind of a council estate area. We just associate that, and we had this discussion just before we came on the show as well about even things like paedophilia or sexual abuse or domestic violence. We assume it's just something that's kind of prone to a particular culture or, you know, class, but it's not.
Yeah.
And people would struggle, you know, if the person abusing is someone of a high profile.
Yes,
it's like, oh, who's going to believe me? I'm invisible. And like the sister said, if you're listening to this, you know, we are here to support you, and people will listen to you and believe in you. So please don't feel that you're trapped and there's no one out there, because past your situation, there is support out there.
And, sorry, can I just?
Yeah.
I think, like you said, it's the stereotype. We all tend to create a stereotype, and that is something within domestic violence that you see, you know, somebody who's respectable, who has a really good reputation out there, regardless of what, you know, man, woman, whichever it's just one of those things. You just don't expect a certain or a particular type of person to be classed as a perpetrator. And I think sometimes when you do say something, it's like you said, is will they believe you? And I think sometimes that's what becomes the difficulty of being able to open up and say, but going back from that, it is important, you need to say something. And unfortunately, we do live in a world where, you know, we need proof for everything, you know, what's happening, you know, how's it going, what proof have you got? That is something that's always asked. And it's just unfortunate, but you build that, you build a picture, you tell somebody, you know, there's loads of different areas and places you can go to mention what is going on.
Right. Now we're on something of a line in terms of, let's just say somebody's watching us today, and I hope not for anybody, but they are suffering in silence. You as practitioners, you as people who have worked in this field for many years, maybe not currently, but then you still are supporting. What is there? How would somebody who is vulnerable, alone, on their own, without any support structure in terms of family and friends, suffering in silence, what would they do besides dialing 999 or doing something like that? What's out there? I mean, we talked about culture and religion and izzat and khandan or whatever you want to call it. The issue is, how would one address these issues without being ostracized and left out alone by the community or society and whoever they are with?
So I just wanted to add is, I think one thing is about even acknowledging that you are being abused, because one thing I've noticed, a lot of people are being abused, and the abuser will kind of like proper psychotic, right? They'll play these mind games with you, and a lot of times I know people who are being abused, they'll say, oh well, he was having a bad day, or she is hormonal, you know, my wife is emotionally abusing me, or she hit me, but you know, it's fine, it's okay, she was having a bad day. And so the first thing is that abuse is not okay at all, under any circumstances, you know. It's not okay at all. So the first thing is to acknowledge that it's not your fault, and abuse is not all right. So even if someone claims you've done something wrong, we are humans, sit down, talk about it like adults. Abuse is not okay ever, whether it's parents abusing their kids or anything. And I think it's also about, it's not your fault. You know, because once again, the person abusing can say it's your fault. Look what you made me do, and I love you. I didn't mean to do that. So it's very toxic. So you might get a glimpse of the person loving you, but they abuse you too, and then you think, because people don't fit into neat boxes. So the abuser isn't always abusing. You know, they might buy you gifts, they'd be nice to you, they take care of you, and you might think, oh, this person's not so bad. So I think the first thing is to acknowledge it's abuse, to stop justifying it. And also then to speak up, and there is support out there, and I think Sister here was getting to that point.
I mean, that's absolutely fantastic what you said, because without acknowledging what is happening to you, or you know, coming to terms with what's happening, because again, you know, I think within our community certain things are seen as a norm, So you tend to overlook it as being domestic abuse. So it is really important to understand. And like I said, there's domestic violence in itself is there's so much. It's broad. There's so much different types of it. But yeah, understanding, acknowledging that is the initial step to be able to deal with the matter. And there is so many different ways out there if you do not want to speak to a family member because of you're not sure of what could happen. There are friends that you could speak to who might be able to point you in the right direction. Again, if that doesn't work, there are so many different services available. For example, we all have to go to see our doctors for whatever reason, be it to do with the children, yourself, health visitor. You could speak to these people who will get you the support that's needed. And I think that's like taking the initial step, because a lot of people are afraid. But again, within our community, there is, people go to so many different kind of gatherings. You see a lot of gathering for women and things like that. Even there, having a little conversation with somebody, I think, if you don't want to go down to the professional route, because some people are afraid. If they go to the GP, mention it to the doctor, there's so many protocols that need to be followed. Are they going to take it as, I don't want it to go as far as that, because you'll hear, I don't want the police to get involved, but I want it to stop.
So they want to deal with it, but in a kind of a subtle, quiet, control kind of way with that.
Ladies,
right,
I know we are having a good flowing discussion, but unfortunately we're going for a short break. Just to recap, and I'll recap before we do go for a break, is first and foremost is acknowledgement of the violence, non-justification,
definitely,
not for your fault, and reporting services available. So, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters at home, you're watching us. We'll be back with you shortly, just after break. Thanking you very much.